from Hummingbot.
Nice meeting you. Also, Kerman.
Hey, Kerman, based out here in Sydney and currently the founder of ARC and write DeFi Weekly.
And last but, and Kerman is the host, obviously. So, and last but not least, Sam.
Hey, I'm Sam Bankman-Fried from FTX and Serum and stuff.
And stuff. Okay, cool, perfect. And I'm gonna hop off actually. So, and this is going live, I think now. And so I will let Kerman take off, and yeah, have fun.
Sweet. Great to meet everyone here. So today's conversation is all about AMMs and answering a lot of the buzz that's been going on crypto Twitter. Before we kick off, it'd be great to just get like a quick 5-second introduction. Everyone knows everyone, but would be sweet to kick it off. So yeah, Will, would be great to get a quick intro.
Hey, I'm Will. I'm the founder of Parsec, which is a pro DeFi dashboard. And we also have a research arm where I put out research about things like AMMs.
Sweet. Thanks, Will. Carlo, if you could go.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Carlo, co-founder and COO of Hummingbot. So we created Hummingbot, which is an open source market-making trading bot that connects both centralized and decentralized exchanges. We also run a liquidity mining platform, which we call Hummingbot Miners. So in concept, it's similar to liquidity mining, as you all probably who've tuned in are aware of in DeFi, but we run it for centralized exchanges as well as for token issuers who are listed on centralized exchanges.
Perfect. That's really exciting. Victor, would be cool if you could go. Oh, you're on mute, Victor. Cool, you're good now.
So hi guys, this is Victor. So I'm the CEO for Alpha Wallet. I'm based in Australia, Sydney. So Alpha Wallet is one of the founding team members for this project called Cofix. It is a new on-chain market making protocol based on the computational finance concept. So I can share with you more later.
Sweet, plenty of insights coming soon. And yes, Sam, of course.
My name is Sam Bankman-Fried. I'm the CEO of FTX, a crypto derivatives exchange. And recently I've been spearheading Project Serum, which is a DeFi ecosystem based on Solana.
Cool. It's a lot of exciting things happening with Solana. And yeah, Antonio, over to you finally.
Hey guys, I'm Antonio, the founder of DYDX. We're a decentralized exchange for margin trading and most recently perpetuals contracts.
Sweet, easy. Let's jump straight into it. So for context, a lot of being an LP in the DeFi space right now is a bit of an interesting game. Uniswap pioneered it as an easy way to earn a risk-free return on providing two assets inside an AMM. But as the industry has matured, we've realized it's anything but risk-free. And we're almost at a point now where the impermanent loss and hedging gain side is becoming increasingly difficult. And that's where we've seen a lot of innovation in the AMM space around different AMMs that specialize for certain functions that try to fix certain issues. And this discussion today is about talking about some of those in an open panel. So let's get kicked off. The first question which we have is, why does impermanent loss exist, and what are some of the existing solutions to compensate LPs for the potential loss they may take compared to if they were to hold the assets? Antonio, if you'd be down to take this one, that'd be cool.
Sure thing. So yeah, first of all, DYDX is not an automated market maker. So just kind of answering this, I guess, as an observer to the DeFi space. My opinion on impermanent loss is that it's a bit of a misnomer. Like it doesn't really seem like to me there's any reason why it should be impermanent. I guess in terms of like ways that you could come up with to kind of compensate like users for loss they may suffer as a result of like the token prices changing that they've kind of deposited for their LP tokens. I mean, I think this is where a lot of the like liquidity mining stuff has come in as an early incentive to compensate a lot of those users. I guess my opinion though, if I'm being honest, is like, I feel like it's kind of hard to make it such that there is no risk for depositing as a liquidity provider. I think it's just more important to be able to like be transparent about those risks and manage them over time. But I'd love to hear other people's opinions if they're kind of closer to the AMM space.
Yeah, I'd like to just jump in there. So I think when I think of impermanent loss, everyone knows the way AMMs work is someone has to arb the contracts to keep pricing in line with where the market thinks it should be. And so it's a zero-sum game. So if someone's arbing, it means someone's losing the arb. So that's where basically the liquidity providers are losing value because they're getting arbed away. So naturally, they're the ones who are kind of falling short there. So what we've seen so far is like in liquidity mining, but providing liquidity mining rewards. Initially, they've been pretty generous. So I think like they've kind of, at some point, probably when Uniswap first started, the 0.3% fees were probably insufficient. I know there's kind of been research showing that if you had been a liquidity provider, you're probably worse off than just buying and holding assets. So I think back then, it probably wasn't so attractive to be a Uniswap liquidity provider. But as the balancers, Ampleforth, and CurveFi, all these liquidity mining protocols and Compound added incentives, the incentives were so good that the value of that basically overshadowed the impermanent loss. So I think what we'll see now is there has to be some kind of point where there's some equilibrium. And it actually relates to us, even though we're not an AMM. We face this every day because the concept is very similar to what normal market makers, the risk they take. So inventory risk, things like that. So what we've seen with our trader, with our kind of platform is we're trying to kind of find the right level of where should we set incentives to compensate fairly and also adjust for permanent loss, or in our case, like inventory risk, price risk. So that's kind of a moving thing. I think a lot of these liquidity mining protocols, they're fairly early on. So we view it as kind of an ongoing experiment, similar with our platform. It's something that over time we'll probably have better ways to kind of measure what is the fair value, where should this be. Whereas I think initially with Uniswap, it's probably too little. With the current wave of liquidity mining, it's probably too much. Now we kind of have to evolve to somewhere that makes more sense for general the market.
Yeah, so just touching on that, liquidity mining is one way to compensate the risk taken on, but it doesn't entirely solve the problem because you're just throwing protocol rewards at the problem. If you want larger sums of money, especially institutional or CeFi players to come in, there has to be more fundamental value being derived from somewhere. And maybe Sam, you might have some good perspective as to how that might happen.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's kind of fucked up how we got where we did. I don't really like the language, the like impermanent loss and things. I mean, they're relabeling, as people have said, things that already exist, but sort of trying like mystifying them almost. Like impermanent loss, just getting picked off to like showing a market and then someone trading against you, and maybe they're informed, you know. And when we talk about compensating for impermanent loss, like the equivalent for this is like you're market making, you're just quoting a market and you have some width you're quoting on. And like, you know, the wider you quote, like the more you're surcharging for that. And the question is like, at what quoting width, if you're just like sitting there quoting all the time, are you like not net losing money from quoting? That's sort of like the equivalent question. And like, there's lots of technology to solve this. Like, that's what markets are for. Like, there's a reason that when you have order books, the order books aren't like, you know, and if you are providing, then your bids and your offers must be exactly 30 basis points apart. Like, no, you can send whatever you want. And, you know, the market gets as tight as it thinks it's efficient to get. And in like extremely illiquid pieces of shit, it'll sometimes be 2% wide, and that is what it is. And in, you know, Bitcoin USD order books, it'll be 2 bips wide, and that is what it is. And so rather than like trying to like determine the correct amount of taker fees, like the right thing to do is let the makers dynamically set them based on what they think. And you can try and do this with an AMM. Like you could imagine having an AMM where like the liquidity providers vote on the width or something like that. But like the real answer here is order books. Like there's a reason that almost all the volume that trades on you know, venues like this ends up on order books. It's because they are like the fundamental like structure for two people or arbitrarily manning people to express arbitrary opinions about what they would buy and sell at different levels. And I think that the reason that we don't have order books in DeFi is just Ethereum can't handle it. Like, just too slow and expensive to have a matching engine. But if you migrate to like a much faster chain, you can get them. So like, I think, and obviously this is sort of what I think, given that's what I did, but like, you go to Solana and you can have an on-chain matching engine in order book. And then you don't have to like answer any of these questions. You just let the market do what it does. And what you end up with is massively more liquidity in most cases. I mean, you can look at almost every serum market is way tighter than you can even theoretically make any market on Uniswap ever. But that doesn't need to be the case. And for some extremely illiquid ones, it's way wider. And in fact, like, you could never show this markets on Uniswap because you'd have to show something way tighter than anyone would ever want to show in it. And so I think like there's, letting the market decide here is just sort of like the right answer. And like any algorithmic thing that you're going to do is going to be like really constraining yourself to only being able to have economically efficient activity when you happen to have guessed about the right amount of adverse selection, given the like, market and conditions at the time.
Yeah, it's that's a really good perspective. It feels like a lot of what you've tweeted expressed in word form. I know there's quite a lot of centralized order book, not maxis, but enthusiasts on Twitter. Curious to see if we have any AMM bulls in the house to counteract that viewpoint.
Yeah, I can jump in.
All right.
I think I agree with a lot of what Sam said. I think the tendency to move AMMs more towards order books is kind of a flawed premise, because I think like really the strength of AMMs is the scalability from a like a nerd capital perspective. Like, as a non-technical person, you can put money into Uniswap, where you can't actually run, running a market maker bot, like you're running against Alameda and people like that. And that's a losing game. And I think the way I look at AMMs is that you're taking, like, people putting money into AMMs are accepting lower returns because they don't have to do any work for it. And it basically dilutes the rest of the LP holders. And so that if all this capital pulls in and the strategy isn't great, like, it's never going to be as good as an order book, like, full stop. I agree with that. But the strength is that you can get these really big capital pools behind them that allow for like lower sharps, lower performance to be diluted across a wider set, because everyone's locked in to the same strategy and can't, play games around jumping in and out and front running each other.
Sure. Yeah, and there's something to be said around like Uniswap's simplicity. Yeah, go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, so I definitely hear you. I think there's specific cases where that makes sense. I think I would basically point to one specific case where I think it makes sense. And that's when you have a project founder that wants to provide liquidity in their token, but it's really early stage. And so it like doesn't make sense for them to go find a market maker or like learn how to like do market making or anything complicated like that. They're just like, look, I don't know. I got $1 million in my token. I got $1 million of USDC. I don't want to think about it. I want people to be able to trade my token, go do something, and just plop it in Uniswap and be like, look, I know I'm losing money on this. I just lit $200,000 on fire, but that's way better than my alternatives in terms of like getting the first bouts of liquidity in my token. Like, practically speaking, this is the answer. And I think that's just totally legit. And I do think that having, just sort of extremely simple, easy, dumb market making bots is really valuable for that specific use case. And I think that AMMs are a decent way of doing it, although I'd prefer like a little more customization where you could create your own, market making bot, and you could specify, effectively what the taker fee is. You could specify what width you want to show. You could specify a little bit about how much you want, how broad you want your curve to be, and you could like display various graphs and be like, this is what your liquidity would look like with these, and you can like turn dials, but like, yeah, okay, that looks about right. Like, that's how many tokens I want to sell before it goes up 3x in price. And so I think like something like that would be like a more powerful version of that. And that's totally doable. You just have like a personal AMM where you initialize it and you can, choose the variables you initialize it with, which is like what one of the uses of pools, which is something's going to come out soon on Ceramar. But I think beyond that, like order books just like basically always have way more liquidity than AMMs, unless you're extremely heavily incentivizing the AMMs. And if you're willing to pay $1 million a day in your tokens to get liquidity, you can do it. But sure, you could do that. There are a lot of ways to get liquidity if you're willing to incinerate, hundreds of millions of dollars a year. The other thing that I would say though, which I think is like pretty relevant, is it's like not clear why people have tied AMMs to yield. Or rather, I think it is clear, but I think it has nothing to do with the AMM part. Like, why do people think of AMMs when they think of yield? Like, it's because there's a pool there. It's because there's a really simple way to give yield, which is people join a pool and you drop the yield in the pool or on the pool tokens or something like that. And the fact that also this pool is providing liquidity is like in some senses kind of an accident. And like you could just be giving people the yield for literally doing nothing, just for like staking or not staking. You just be doing it instead of like for providing liquidity on Uniswap. And I think like the world's gotten a little bit trapped into that mindset just because that it was an easy way to do it because there are pool tokens there. With the exception of the cases where people are intentionally incentivizing liquidity in their own AMM or for their own token to get liquidity for it, in which case there is like an actual kind of trade going on there, but people use it whether or not that's true. And the fact that people use it whether or not that's true, I think is like decent evidence that that like people just sort of wanted a pool-like structure and found one and like accidentally took on impermanent loss plus maker rebates.
Yeah, but I think that's an important point that you can actually tokenize it, because I think what you're describing with like these custom pools and like some of these new AMMs that are more complicated is that it's not as easily tokenized. Like the token doesn't make as much sense because like if it's a personal AMM, like what's like, do you have your own personal token? Like you can't actually give that out to a bunch of token holders. So I actually think that's like the strength of it is that it's dumb and that you can, okay, well here's the token, like get this and then we'll give you a bunch of tokens. Like and obviously like the whole like the yield farming stuff went out of control, but they could give it out to token holders because it was so simple to provide tokens to the pool. And it was just like a platform for them to do that. And then they also got the liquidity on top in like the pool 2 type scenarios.
Yep.
Sure.
Yeah. I heard many concerns about the AMM, and I think there's two major things related to AMM. One is the risk, another thing is the capital efficiency. I mean, so whether making market on AMM is a thing making sense for the market maker. So for the risk itself, we have a mechanism which is actually automatically calculate the risk related to each transaction and accurately compensate the risk. So that means for each transaction against the liquidity pool, there's always no arbitrage opportunity. It's based on the risk for the market maker is currently taking. And on top of this, we think for the capital efficiency side, we need to see who is actually using the AMM. Are those the people just trading, doing some token swap, or the major use case is actually from the machine, is from other smart contract. So based on the analysis for the several AMMs pool, actually 50% plus of the transaction, of the trading transaction, is putting through other smart contracts. So that means the growing for AMM is not only from the trader side, it's mainly comes from the smart contract side. So that means other smart contract can use such a automatic market maker asset pool to provide liquidity for in their own use case. And also there's way to incentivize the traders to provide better capital efficiency. So that is what we are doing at the CoFix. So CoFix basically take the price from a decentralized exchange and based on the volatility and delay risk to accurately calculate each risk for the transaction and do the 100% risk compensate to the market maker. And then on top of it, there's a fee, and the fee is actually distributed to both market maker and the traders. So by doing this, we did some backtest. we believe we can improve the capital efficiency a lot. And also there's no permanent loss and there's no impermanent loss because there's no arbitrage opportunity for any trader to do arbitrage against the pool. So I think this thing will really change the AMM space. As we spoke with several market makers who is doing market on the centralized exchange, they are all pretty excited about this.
Yeah, one thing which I'd love to jump in is Antonio at DYDX probably has a bunch of experience in this regard, because as far as I remember, DYDX started with a host of different liquidity sources and kind of went down a narrow path. So would love to know how you navigated that idea maze between centralized order books and AMM in the context of like growing a DeFi application to the scale of DYDX.
Yeah, great question. So just a bit of history on DYDX. So DYDX used to integrate with 0x and then Oasis DEX. And then we were thinking about like integrating with Uniswap and things like that as well. But basically the problems we were running into at that point in time, and it's certainly changed a good bit since then, were just a real lack of liquidity. It was really tough for market makers to quote, especially on 0x, things like that. Not to pick on them too much, but I think this is the case for like any like open order books or like contract fillable liquidity, that it's just tough when you don't have things like instant and free like order cancellations, things like that. But the hardest part was actually the trade finality, especially for market makers and for our users as well. We got to the point where I think something around like 10 to 15% of all of user trades on DYDX were reverting. So it's like you come to DYDX, you try to open this margin position, you pay all this gas, and then you get a revert. And even if you still look at kind of the rates of reverts on like Uniswaps and things like that, it's still quite high. So I think this is still a pretty big problem for the industry. And just the really big problem that we felt like we needed to solve in one way or another was the trade finality and getting the instant cancellations so we could get a lot more liquidity. And we've done a pretty good job, I think, in terms of building a good amount of liquidity. I think at least when we started, kind of DEXs had on the order of like 100K worth of liquidity in USD on either side of the market within 1%. I think it certainly changed with Uniswap with the liquidity mining more recently, but excluding that, DYDX had about like 600K of liquidity within 1% after that. And this was like really on a similar product, but was just all due to the central order books and central matching that we did. So I think that just like that we made a trade-off basically in terms of like trading off some censorship resistance for some performance on the trading side. And I think that was a good trade-off to make. And it makes it a lot easier for market makers to integrate with DYDX. And that's why we made that trade-off.
How do you see DYDX's role is by hosting an order book and having that matching engine in-house, you've somewhat traded off an aspect of decentralization where DYDX can never be fully run by the community. And there's always this notion of this centralized entity. So how do you see DYDX kind of being able to solve for that trade-off, or is it ever solvable?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say we're not 100% married to like the central order books and central matching engine forever. It's just, in my opinion, like the best solution to the problem. And we have like a real product that like real people are using right now. So we wanted to solve it as soon as possible. But I'd say we see ourselves more as like not totally as a DeFi company and not totally as like centralized exchange, obviously, but somewhere in the middle where like we're making revenue, like we have a product which we think, especially after our Starcore integration, will be like pretty competitive from a product perspective with centralized exchanges. So I'd say it lends us like somewhere in the middle where there's like, we kind of think of it as two separate things. It's like we have the central entity that's developing this product, and then we have this open protocol, and those things can be separate. Of course, they're like really interactive, but they don't have to be the same thing.
For sure. Yeah, Carlo, I wonder if you've got some perspective on, yeah.
I guess from our perspective, I think like one of the challenges with AMMs is that they're quite rigid. So I think like that's obviously if you try to set rules beforehand, the markets are not always predictable. So that's what the downfalls are. I think what we'll see is like as things develop other protocols, there will always be a need for these different formats of exchange or trading venues. I think they all serve different kind of purposes. So I don't think one is necessarily like universally better than the other. I think they all have different purposes that they'll be set to kind of address. I think one of the challenges with DEXs, like for example, is just a lot of the large institutions or some of the regulated entities just can't trade on DEXs. So that's something that's obviously like a big advantage for centralized exchanges from that perspective. So there are some of these kind of things that will kind of keep these things have how these different types of exchanges and protocols kind of exist, which is actually good for us because we actually integrate to all the different ones. So we kind of bridge between the different protocols, exchanges, and venues. And so we actually work with AMMs, we work with DEXs, we work with centralized exchanges, kind of to bridge all, because there is going to be some like market fragmentation from these different use cases and different solutions. And then there will always be some kind of need that needs to at some level bring some of them at least together.
Yeah, how do you see the active involvement of specialized AMMs coming into play? So you've got, for example, constant sum, constant product, then the constant function market maker adapted by Curve, and then I think Dodo is doing like something unique as well. So how do you see those more specialized formulas fulfilling different needs within the market?
I guess just take a step from our perspective, because they're different, there will be different opportunities, they will create different trading opportunities. So there'll always be a need to kind of, at some level, bring them in line with the rest of the market. But I think, like, for example, in Victor's case, it's really interesting that they're taking a different approach to it. I think that addresses a lot of the problem shortcomings. And I think we'll also see this evolve over time. We'll see kind of the Uniswaps of the world are kind of V1, and then we'll see kind of improvements. We'll identify the shortcomings and keep evolving. So I think we'll just see different again, different products that address different needs as they kind of evolve, which may not necessarily like make the original technology inusable or just complete. There could still be specific needs for that, but I think we'll just see different needs, different use cases, different solutions for each.
Sweet. Yeah, Sam, I know you're going to jump in, so yeah.
Yeah, I've been sort of biting my tongue a little bit. Yeah, it's, I mean, I think a lot of this comes down to like, what's your goal? Like what are you aiming for, and how big are you aiming? And I think like, for what DeFi is right now, I think you can cobble together a lot of these things, and it sort of kind of almost works. And you can just like keep tweaking parameters and like get to something which is like kind of okay enough that if you're spending enough like if you're giving enough money away to get people to use the ecosystem, they will. But if your goal is to build like a huge thriving ecosystem that's like positive revenue instead of negative revenue, and to have it really start to grow in scope in a sustainable way, and really think about how big and valuable it can get, I think like, you know, it's a single order book obsoletes every one of these put together, and that's just like pretty damning. And I think that that's like a little bit too strong, and it is a little bit too strong because of the thing I said earlier about, you know, trying to get very initial liquidity in your project. And there's like a few other situations like that where you legitimately do want basically an AMM. But like you can just build bots on an order book, which do the same thing. It's not like you can't do that with an order book also, right? It's just like you can also do anything else. And I think that like, you know, it's worth remembering why we got here. We got here because Ethereum can't do anything else right now, because it doesn't have enough processing power to support any other sorts of trading activities. And but like that also is a way of saying it doesn't have enough processing power to scale. Like so if everyone knows it, that's true right now. And when I say Ethereum, I mean Ethereum 1.0, the thing that's being used right now, sort of not making statements about like ETH 2.0, right? Like ETH 2.0 might be a totally different thing. We'll see exactly how it ends up, but you know, that's certainly gonna be more scaling than what we have right now. But wherever things end up, whether it's ETH 2.0, whether it's rollups, whether it's hybrid solutions like DYDX, or whether it's another L1, which is faster, and any world in which DeFi really grows is going to be a world in which you have massively more compute available on chain, and in which like you just want to go to the products that are right instead of like cobbling together what you can. And like, that means having AMMs, and it means having order books, and it means that probably like 95% of the volume is going to be coming from the order book side, not the AMM side. And it's not that like AMMs won't play a role, but like it's very much a supporting object rather than the primary object.
How do you see protocols such as Curve, which are in some cases, I'm not super cross market, so take this with a grain of salt, where you do have more competitive prices offered by Curve than any centralized order book in comparison for stablecoin swaps in particular.
Right. So Curve's an interesting case, and it's true for some, but not all stablecoin swaps. You can get really fucking liquid stablecoin swaps if you go to the right places in CeFi as well. But you can, and there are cases where it's true on Curve, and I think particularly if you're looking at something like, TUSD to DAI, I think that's like an example of a thing that's often like more liquid on Curve than anywhere else. And I think I would say two things. The first is that, again, it's incentivized, right? Like they're giving away a lot of money each day to get that liquidity, right? If like FTX were like, all right, guys, $300,000 a day given away for free for people to provide liquidity on stable coins, boy, would we have liquid markets, right? So like that's just like the first thing to keep in mind. Like you can buy liquidity, yeah. But the other thing is that is legitimately like a niche where something like an AMM makes more sense, because like when you're thinking about like, all right, how about like a front versus Lua order book, like how much, what should like the sort of like taker fee be there, like what width should everyone be providing with, who the hell knows, right? Like I mean, any attempt to just specify that, you're losing a ton of value. When you're talking about like TUSD versus USDC, and you have to like pre-specify a lot of the parameters, you're just losing a lot less, right? Because you've got a pretty damn good guess about like what the true cost is of converting between TUSD and USDC. It's like a couple bips. And so I zero, but it takes time and it's a little bit of a hassle. And so in that specific case, I think that like an AMM is way less disadvantaged than it is in most other cases, because you can actually make sort of predictable predictions about what the market should look like, and you maybe think it's kind of mean reverty. And so like to the extent people have capital they're not doing anything with, being able to provide on a TUSD USDC market and just hope it reverts to one is like maybe just a good trade. They're like providing to small short-term 3 basis point demands for specific liquidity that's going to revert, so you can always redeem it. And so I think that like Curve also did choose like a very specific case where AMMs lose just a lot less than they do in sort of the general case. And so I think that's like another important piece of context behind it.
Sweet.
I think to compare the AMM with the order book system, the first thing we need to see what is the key advantage of an order book and what is the key advantage for AMM. And then we need to see where should be the best infrastructure or the best system to run such mechanisms, to run such a system. So for order book, I see it's a perfect way to do price discovery, because price discovery can never be actually calculated through a fixed formula, which is actually done by many of other AMMs, like Uniswap. They use a fixed formula, involved with the arbitrager, try to use the formula to pretend the price as a market price, but always there's a differences. And for order book, it's discover the price based on the trading and market makers activity, high frequency activities. So to compare this, I see the best place to run the order book is still on a centralized system, because no matter how fast the centralized system will develop in future, it will always slower than the centralized system. So that means it will always have the slowest reflect to the market information. And for trader, for the people who contribute most to the price discovery, they are actually the information trader. So that means that they want to cash out their information in very short period as fast as possible. When we spoke with Jump Trading, they told us they spent $14 million just to put on a microwave tower, which to help them to save 0.00007 second for each transaction. And to achieve this kind of efficiency, the decentralized system will never be better than the centralized system. So we believe the price discovery should be first happen on the centralized system. And then for the decentralized system, the most key benefits that is actually is by having this decentralized infrastructure, it can kind of remove the counterparty risk. And also by providing the super interoperability for the smart contract itself. So it's kind of collect the liquidity to flow between different smart contract, different services freely. So that means it basically removes the liquidity risk for this blockchain world. So these are the two key benefits for the blockchain-based finance system. So that's why we think the AMM will always have a position in this blockchain world, especially as I mentioned, most of the trading volume, most of the people using the pool are actually, most of the party using the pool are actually the smart contract, not the real people.
Yeah, that's a great perspective, Victor. Yeah, carry on, Antonio.
Oh, no, I was just going to jump in and kind of maybe change directions on the conversation a little bit. But I think one of the things that kind of is really valuable for any exchange, or the main thing you want if you're any exchange, is just organic taker volume. And I think that that even is kind of a bigger focus if you're an exchange or an exchange-like product than necessarily like having exactly the best prices like on the maker side. And I think that's one of the reasons why like we've seen automated market makers be so successful. So they actually have a great product for like takers. It's like pretty dead simple on Uniswap to like go and like put in one token, like say what you want to swap to, like swap it. Okay, maybe the prices are like, you know, 0.1% worse than like FTX or something like that. But it's still like a really simple interface. I have my tokens in MetaMask already, like I can just swap them. Of course, it's not like objectively the best user interface, but it's a great user interface for people that have like all these random tokens in their MetaMask wallet, which I think is a pretty big market as we've seen with Uniswap. And kind of similarly on the maker side, we touched on this before, but I almost think again on the maker side, it's not so much about like totally optimizing the returns for makers as it is just providing them a really good user experience on the maker side. It's dead simple on Uniswap, right? Or for any like AMM, it's just like deposit and you like start making in theory, like money based off of like returns. Like even before like a lot of the liquidity mining on Uniswap, we really saw them just like their maker capital like explode on the system. Can't remember what it was at before like say the sushi stuff started, but I think it was at like a couple $100 million that was already locked on Uniswap. And that was really just all locked because of this organic taker volume that we saw just really come from a lot of the boom in DeFi tokens. And that's why like AMMs and Uniswap in particular became so successful, is because they had that taker volume. So I think like the liquidity side and all the conversations we've been having about like optimizing like basically the amount of liquidity you get per like unit of like maker capital, it's like super important. I think it's still like 100 to like 1,000x better on like central limit order books than it is on AMMs. But just want to say, I don't think that's necessarily like the only thing that matters if you're an exchange.
Yeah, I think that summarizes like the conversation where you kind of have two axes, right? One is ease of use and the other is efficiency. And it's
I
like
think the user,
the
user experience is definitely a plus point, but actually it's not a major point. Because if we're looking at a single liquidity pool on Uniswap, for example, the USDT ETH, it's actually 55% of the taker is a smart contract. It's other smart contract. And actually more than 80% of the taker is smart contract. That is including other liquidity pool, other like a liquidity pool routing through the ETH and the USDT, and also the outside smart contract, which is not provided by Uniswap. So that means that the taker side, there's not many real uninformed trader that is actually placed order on Uniswap to swap USDT and ETH. And if we're looking at the liquidity provider side, currently I consider the liquidity on all the AMM is still like a tiny compared with the whole liquidity in the whole market. And that is because although they provide a good user experience, but the risk is there. The first thing is that the market maker cannot do perfect hedging on those type of AMM, which is based on a price curve. And the second thing is, although they set a fixed amount of fee or you call it the compensation rates, but that amount is not accurately calculated. So that means that the AMM itself always fall into two states. Either they are overcompensate or they are undercompensate. If it's undercompensate, that basically means the arbitrage is arbitrage against the pool. The pool is having some permanent loss. And if it's over the risk, although it's they can maintain maybe 80% of the time, it's over, but it's only require like a one big shock, and then the market maker will lose all the margin they made for the whole market making period. So these are the main thing stopping the serious money, big money, go into the on-chain market making. And we solve this. Yep.
Yeah, sorry. No, I was just going to add to this from
you
our.
can continue.
Yes, just from our own experience, because we kind of have it firsthand as well. Is so we found that a lot of our users, even though the yields on our platform are actually probably higher than DeFi market maker right now, but it's a bit more complicated to be a market maker, to run a bot, to have the hands-on monitoring all the time versus like just depositing it into a smart contract. So the UX is definitely a big aspect of that. And I think like also back to Sam's earlier comments, one of the reasons like we kind of consider yield, we actually took this approach when we first started as well, is initially the users, market makers that we were looking at, the people who wanted to participate, they were kind of coming from the background that they're buy and hold investors. They have assets and they want to deploy them. So how can they do that efficiently? So that's kind of like why people, or even we, when we first started, thought of it as yield, because like if they want to deploy the assets to market making for something, what kind of yields can they earn on that versus zero for hodling or versus doing other things like lending. We also compared it to things like how else can they deploy assets, do things like lending on Compound. And that's kind of where it came from that. And what we've seen, even though that the UX is definitely on centralized exchanges, our bots are much more customizable. So it's a lot more better for folks to can manage their own risk. But that does actually take some experience. That does take time. They can't just simply deposit, forget it, and just like let it run its course. They actually have to monitor the bots. So that's definitely a big part of how we're seeing like our users, even some of our users are also involved in DeFi liquidity mining. So we see some kind of going between the two worlds, and we see that the UX is a really big aspect. So that's like, especially with the liquidity mining rewards, because the centers are so much, it kind of made it kind of be a no-brainer. So they didn't have to worry about impermanent loss, because that was kind of like just drowned out by the rewards that people were earning. It became less of a consideration. So that's why I guess just from our perspective versus from the maker's perspective between AMMs and centralized exchanges.
Yes, that's exactly why the current on-chain market making size is still at this level. That is because most of the existing people who make market, they are the people Carlo just described. They are just like a normal user, normal holder who don't have a market making experience, and they have some fund and they want to deploy the fund. But in the normal market making world, market making is a professional, very professional work. It's not like for every single normal consumers to do. And that's why by design, we want to cover like both. We want to give the serious market maker a way to accurately calculate the risk, to do zero risk market making, on the same time to improve the capital efficiency, to let them to make at least as much money as making market on centralized exchange or on the order book. And on the same time, because it's an AMM, of course, the normal user, those people who have extra fund, they can still using it.
Yeah, I think one perspective, and so we've kind of seen through this conversation, is you've got efficiency and ease of use on a spectrum. And when you think about most technology paradigms, you have the same debate come up in many, many forms, right? We see it kind of emerging with like computers versus an iPad, or like say laptops versus like a traditional PC. And you always have this prosumer, like you have the consumer, the prosumer, and then the professional. And it seems like AMMs are for the consumer. You'll have some hybrids that appeal to the prosumer, and then centralized order books being for the professionals. But one thing which I feel like gets a bit lost is that with the new paradigm, there's always a new way of thinking, which enables new use cases we hadn't seen before. And one of the biggest problems with DeFi right now is the whole Oracle problem, right? Paying for consistent price updates on chain and verifying the accuracy and safety of those is literally a multi-billion-dollar question. And we talk about the inefficiencies of an AMM, but I wonder if any of you believe that those inefficiencies could actually be used to pay for providing an oracle. And we've seen this with Uniswap's time-weighted average price oracles as being a step in that direction. But I wonder if you see a world in which that inefficiency becomes a moat to actually provide accurate on-chain pricing, which is resistant to flash loan attacks.
On-chain world is totally different from off-chain. It's the time in the blockchain world is per block. So that means it's not like compared with the physical world. It's not like a continuous timeline. So for a price to be used on-chain, we don't have to require it is the accurate, exactly same market price. Instead, what we should request is for each block, it has a price, and that price don't provide any arbitrage opportunity on-chain based on the chain itself. For example, on Ethereum, they have the block time and they have the gas fee. So that means that there's some cost to do arbitrage. So if you provide a price which is accurately within a range, and within that range, there's no arbitrage opportunity at all for any trading happen against that price, then that is already a price can be used by any DeFi application on-chain. So this is like a fundamental thing we need to understand first. It's not like we just pass the physical world's market price to the blockchain world and then we just use it. It's not like that. And another thing is to using a price oracle. That is basically you are about to bring in some extra risk to your DeFi protocol. You need to understand exactly what risk it is and how to accurately calculate the risk, how to price those risks. And to make the risk to be computable, the first thing is you cannot involve any counterparty risk. If there is a counterparty risk involved, then you can never calculate that risk, because it only requires like one big shot, and then you lose everything. And I think these things happen already with some of the DeFi project, which is heavily depends on the oracle price. And then the question is actually goes to how we can get a real decentralized price oracle. That means that the price discovery and the price verification is all happening on-chain, and it have the same, at least the same decentralization degree as the underlayer blockchain. And it have to be the cost to attack this price oracle have to be as high as the cost to attack the chain itself, which is like the 51% attacked.
Of course, yeah.
And to achieve this, Uniswap actually did a very good start. But the problem with it is they do the price discovery and the verification and the trading all together, which is not really making sense. For example, if we can decouple the price discovery and the price verification from the Uniswap and enforce this process to make it even more strong, have a better network, have some factors inside to make people attacking this price even difficult, then that can become a real decentralized price oracle for any projects to use. And that is the price oracle we are using. It is called the Nest protocol. It's a highly undervalued project, I can say.
Of course. Yeah, I think cost of security is definitely one aspect and one that has to be balanced out with the value of which the oracle is securing.
I think that's one of the strengths of Uniswap is like I think it's one of the better like on-chain oracles out there, to be honest. I think because you have this verifiable like arbitrageurs are, in my opinion, arbitrageurs are going to be better at pricing something than injecting a price from some other source. Because that is literally like they're arbitraging something on a centralized venue wherever like the actual trading flow is. So I think it's like you're fighting a losing battle if you're trying to like be better than arbitrageurs. And I think actually like arbitrageurs are like a huge strength to existing AMM models because they're so incentivized to make money and like get the market to the right price. And also when you like inject on-chain oracles in like certain scenarios, like there are a lot of issues, like as we've seen with synthetics, and you have to add additional functionality that creates these exit games and like settlement latency.
Yeah,
totally agree. But have you considering this kind of design, which is basically very similar to Uniswap? So that means that people who can open like a double side option, which is they think that is based on the market price, and then let that option sitting on the blockchain for a certain period, for example, like a 10 block or 25 block, let any arbitrager try to do arbitrage against this option. So that means that if there is an arbitrage opportunity, then the arbitrager will take this option to make this price invalid. And if within certain period, there's no arbitrage happen, then that means this price already verified by the decentralized decentralized system. And to enforce this, you can actually put in some interesting mechanisms. For example, if an arbitrager want to take this option, on the same time, they have to report a price they think is right, and also double size the quotation size. And by doing this, it basically makes the people who want to report false price or trying to attack the price oracle, the cost for them will increase to super high within very short period. That can be even within like a 1 block. So that is the idea to decouple the price discovery from Uniswap. And the beautiful thing is you discovery and verify once, all the other DeFi can use it.
Yeah, indeed. Antonio, if you want to jump in, because I know you're gonna say something.
Yeah, I guess my opinion is that like I think a lot of this theoretical stuff about like how decentralized the price oracles are and things like that is not especially relevant for some of the like products that are out there right now. Certainly it is for some, but I guess maybe just using DYDX as an example where we're trying to offer like reasonably high leverage like products. The real problem that we're trying to solve is that these like darn price oracles take like 10 to 15 minutes sometimes to like update their prices. And like, how the heck are you going to run like a leveraged exchange when your price index price doesn't update for 10 minutes? And it gets to be in some like scary situations when it's like Black Thursday and the price just dropped like 30% in the last like 1 minute. So I agree it's important, but I think just like the first order problem is we need to solve the performance. So maybe similar to what Sam's doing with Serum, but basically what we're doing with the price oracle updates on DYDX version 2 is we're just putting them on layer 2 and just getting like way more performance out of them. We're using the exact same oracle system, so we're still using the same like MakerDAO v2 oracle system. Decentralization is that, which we could probably argue about like how good that is for days. But just I think that'll just be a really big step up in performance in terms of getting like sub-second like oracle price updates, and I think that's a really important problem that needs to be solved right now.
So
the problem provided by Anthony is actually we consider it as a wrong way to use price oracle. The price should never be feed. The price should never be feeded to the smart contract itself. It should be the people who submit the transaction. They should bring in a price which is recognized by the DeFi protocol itself. For example, in your case, if it's an asset being liquidated, then it should be the arbitrator to bring the right price to liquidate this asset instead of the smart contract, DeFi smart contract itself sitting there to receiving some price from a feed, because a feed can never be like right on the time. But a transaction who actually want to do something, want to trade, or want to arbitrage, or want to liquidate something, they are right on time. When they submit this transaction, they carry the latest price with him, and that is recognized by the DeFi protocol itself. So this is the right way to use price oracle. Otherwise, the price request and the price feed is actually decoupled. It's not happening in the atomic way, and there will be other problems as well. That's why Chainlink got the kind of hacked last month, and 700 ETH got drilled, because they are doing price feeding to the smart contract. And also there's like a responsibility related issues for DeFi Oracle receiving a price feed. That basically you reach an agreement with the price Oracle, and then you are responsible for using this price. But actually this price is serving the transaction made by the user. So it should be the user formed the agreement with the price Oracle, and the DeFi protocol itself just serve as the protocol, just to execute the transaction based on the input.
Expanding on that with the price feed, yeah, Sam, like I was curious to know, like, how do you see order books and being able to maybe provide some sort of price feed is
Yeah, you can just do it. It's on chain. You just look at mid or like some better version of mid. It's like way better than any of this shit. And you need to move off Ethereum anyway. It's all fucked if you're there. So I don't think it's worth talking about what the right oracle is for current Ethereum as it is, because it's just not useful. So you're going to be moving to a faster chain or L2 or whatever you're doing. And if you want composability on it, that means you have to be able to get on-chain data. You're gonna have an order book anyway because it's better, and then just look at the price of the order book. And there's a better oracle than any of this. And I think it's like really hard to talk about the right way to do an oracle in terms of like how it's quoted without talking about the use case, right? Like, is this being used to tell whether you can liquidate someone? In that case, obviously you can't have the user submitting the oracle price, haha, oracle price for ETH is 0. I'm gonna liquidate you now. Like that doesn't work, right? And so like, you know, I mean, it depends on why you need your oracle.
That depends on what oracle you are using. And also you mentioned the order book is much better to do discovery. Totally agree. That's why I said that the price discovery should always happen on a super fast centralized
but you can do this on
computing
DeFi
system
too, right? Like Serum is just massively better than anything else in DeFi by orders of magnitude for oracles or price discovery. And I don't know why people bother using anything else right now, right? Like is 1 second settlement time. It costs a tiny fraction of a penny to place it or cancel an order on it. It has like 10 times the liquidity of anything else, and it's all on chain. You can just get on chain data, and like you can do that on any fast, you know, on any like really fast chain. So like, you know, I think that's just sort of the answer there. And like, yeah, you can try and do these other things, but like anything that's constrained by Ethereum block times is going to be like not able to create a particularly efficient system, no matter how you're doing it. Literally 1 block in Ethereum is too long. Like that alone is long enough that no matter what oracle system you're using, the oracle is going to be stale a decent fraction of the time, unless you like don't care about like 50 bips, at which point you're already pricing out like the majority of all volume. So, you know, I think that you're really playing with your hands tied behind your back. If you go with that, now maybe you decide that like fuck DeFi, like you're just gonna do this in CeFi, and that's fine. But like if you're gonna do it on DeFi, you're constrained by block times anyway. Like, you know, Serum latency is only a block time really. So like you're not really adding a lot of latency on by using that instead of a centralized exchange as your price signal in DeFi. But you know, there is currently more liquidity in CeFi rather, in which case, yeah, just pipe in, you know, oracles from Coinbase or FTX or Binance or whatever you want. And I think that's like a totally fine direction to go in as well. But like you know, it's not going to work on Ethereum anyway because of block time issues and gas costs. And so, you know, you sort of have like, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's
so
feels like, yeah, just
so that's why. So that's why all my point is based on the on-chain non-arbitrage price is different from the market price. So for price discovery for the market price, as I mentioned, it will always request the faster computing system. And no matter how fast it's like other blockchain system can be, it will always slower than the centralized system. So that means the market price discovery will always starting from the centralized system. But for a price to be used on a blockchain, no matter it's a Ethereum blockchain or it's other blockchain, it will always different from the market price. You don't have to be using a market price on a smart contract system on a blockchain in the blockchain world. As I mentioned, in the blockchain world, the only thing you need to make sure that is that this price don't have a counterparty risk, and also this price can sit in this one block. That means each block have at least one non-arbitrage price provided, and then that is already can work for all the system inside this blockchain ecosystem already.
Sweet. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I mean, it depends what you're using an Oracle for, but it's pretty terrifying. Like if you're not stress testing these prices by exposing them to like open market forces, then the Oracles are just going to be wrong a lot. And again, like this all goes back to like why you want an Oracle in the first place. And it's a little bit hard to talk about in the abstract, but like you sort of need to allow someone to trade $10 million against your Oracle if you want to be able to trust it. And so if you know that's sort of like the real stress test, and you know you have to be able to trade as much against your Oracle as you would be able to trade on whatever you're using your Oracle on. And now we get to the thing, which is like that means that like your Oracle is going to be kind of close to as good if it's on the same system as the thing you're trading, if that thing's latency isn't too bad compared to block times, because that's the stress it has to support, right? Like, and so I think that that you know this sort of like characteristic time here is a block time. That's like the amount of latency you have. And so like the big thing is that if your latency is way more than that, then that's really bad. And if your latency isn't way more than that, then the Oracle latency isn't sort of like the major problem in this system.
Indeed.
Yeah, so that's why we mentioned we're using this interesting price Oracle. If you're interested, you can do some more research. Basically, it can provide like a one non-arbitrage opportunity price for every single block. And that means every single block. And also it's already verified by decentralized arbitrage for any people to verify.
So you say
anyone. It's decentralized. So that means anyone can take the option, as I mentioned. If you want to quote 1 ETH equals to 1 ETH is the 300 USDT, then you need to put on 10 ETH and 3,000 USDT double side option for any people to trade against it.
But that means that right. But that means that in order to get an Oracle that could like defend a real order book, anyone to ever quote a single Oracle price would need to like take $20 million and plop it in a smart contract just to generate a single Oracle quote, which seems like pretty inefficient to me, as opposed to just repurposing the existing order book for it.
It's not like that. Because if you quote 100 to 300, 1 ETH to 300, the arbitrager want to take they can spend the 300 to buy your option, of course, but on the same time they need to give a double-sized quotation based on the existing quote size. And if other people want to take it, they need to double again. So that means the attacking cost can be increased to, as I mentioned, like a half. Or not half, 66% of the total Ethereum, total asset on Ethereum theoretically within very short periods, can even within one block, if all the people is trading against each other within the mempool.
Within one block, that'd be pretty impressive. But like this is all getting matched. Like you're just recreating an order book, right? Like that's what this is sort of like recreating an order book and seeing what the resting price of this is. Except it's going to be like extremely slow and expensive because unless it's happening off chain, I don't know if it's happening on chain or off chain. But if it's happening on chain, like this is going to be an extremely expensive process to be running every block. And like I would guess this would play out like, you know, realistically speaking, you're going to get a couple blocks between each one because of like gas costs and stuff. And
yeah.
So hey, that's why you verified once and used by others.
Sorry, Victor, just jump in. we're just a bit over an hour and want to be mindful of everyone else's time here. So just to finish up real quick, it'd be cool if you guys could give all just like a one-liner on what's your personal take on AMMs, bearish, bullish, and where you see them progressing. And we can probably wrap up. Yeah, sorry to put the debate to an end. It's getting really good, but just want to be mindful of everyone else's time here. So yeah, feel free for everyone to go around and we can close up then. Will, if you want to go.
Yeah, sure. I think I'm probably more bullish than most people on the panel, admittedly. But I mean, I think it's a little bit too early to tell. I think we're only a couple of years into the design space, but I'm excited for some of the newer AMMs and the future of these products. But I definitely see a world where it's both, a lot of both. So yeah, I mean, I'm just focused on what the emergent properties of DeFi are, and AMMs seem to be one of them. So I don't see that going away soon.
Sweet. Carlo, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I'm pretty bullish as well. I think it serves a specific need for certain cases, which is the big thing. Like even for Sam mentioned also earlier, like even for issuers now are looking at that as a way to place their tokens initially rather than pay exchange fees, all this other stuff. So I think that's interesting. I think though with the liquidity mining, the incentives we're paying now, I don't think that's sustainable like in the long term. So I think right now it's a good experiment. It's probably happening. It's pretty hot right now. I'm not sure how sustainable that is, but I think it does serve a specific need that will continue even as it evolves.
Sweet. Yeah, I think I'm in agreeing with most of those points as well. Yeah, Victor.
So for me, I believe the centralized finance system and the decentralized finance system will always exist, and they serve different kind of customers based on their advantage. And for us to design something on a decentralized system, we need to understand what exactly the advantage we have and then use those advantage. It's not like saying we want to make the decentralized system as fast as the centralized system. That is not the advantage for the decentralized system itself. And for AMM, I believe it will have a position in the decentralized world because it can serve as the fundamental liquidity pool for any other application, any other DeFi to use.
Yeah. Of course, as they say, right tool for the right job. Sweet. Sam?
Yeah, I think I'm like overwhelmingly bearish on them compared to what it seemed they're held in now, although bullish on them compared to the role that they played a year ago. And way less bearish on a more generalized form and programmable form of AMM on a faster, more efficient chain. Although I still think that they're just like in most cases worse than order books.
All right, it's yeah. I feel like we should start a little thing on crypto Twitter, AMM bulls and AMM maximalists and centralized order book maximalists. It's yep. The Bitcoin Ethereum trend is getting a bit boring. Yeah, Antonio, jump in.
Yeah, maybe I can end it on like somewhere in between. Bullish on like stable type swaps, so like BTC to like WBTC, like stable coins. Also bullish on like the long tail. Not a super original thought, but call it like the 100 to 200, like in lower by like market volume markets, but bearish in like the biggest markets, and that's why we're focused on order books.
Indeed, yeah. Thanks all for this debate. It's I think it's really helped me understand the role of AMMs versus order books more so. Increasingly, it feels like centralized order books are pro-specialized. They're the best tool without a doubt, but they also come at a cost. And it's really just like, can you afford that cost and do you need it? And yeah, just choose the right tool for the right job on whatever your needs are. But thank you once again for all of you guys to jump in today. I know things are really crazy, so always appreciate the time. And thanks to everyone who's watching right now. Hope you guys enjoyed watching this debate. Cool.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Very nice speaking with you guys.
Thank you, guys.
Cheers.
Nice.
Cheers.
See ya.
Bye.